The autumn wind swept across the grounds of Kensington Palace as Prince William walked through the corridors he had known since childhood. The familiar portraits of his ancestors gazed down from their gilded frames. But today, something felt different. His footsteps echoed against the marble floors as he made his way toward a section of the palace he rarely visited. Catherine had been acting strangely for weeks. She would disappear for hours, claiming she needed time to think or rest. When he asked about her day, her answers were vague and distant. The woman who once shared everything with him now seemed to be living behind a wall of secrets. William tried to convince himself it was just stress from their royal duties, but deep in his heart, he knew something was terribly wrong. The letter had arrived that morning, delivered by a courier who insisted it be placed directly into the prince's hands. The envelope bore no official seal, just his name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a single sentence that changed everything. Your Highness, if you seek the truth about your wife's recent behavior, visit the Blue Room on the 3rd floor. The key is where your mother once kept her most precious memories. William's hands trembled as he read the words again. His mother, Princess Diana, had indeed kept a small collection of personal items in a hidden compartment behind a painting in the Blue Room. He remembered discovering it as a child, though he had never dared to touch anything inside. The memory of his mother's gentle voice warning him that some treasures were too fragile for young hands came flooding back. Standing before the ornate door of the Blue Room, William hesitated. The brass handle felt cold under his palm. This room had been locked for years, used only for storage and forgotten memories. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. The air smelled of old books and lavender, a scent his mother had loved. Behind the portrait of King George, William found the small hidden panel just as he remembered. His fingers worked carefully to open the delicate mechanism. Inside lay a collection of his mother's personal belongings, letters, photographs, and a small silver key. The key felt warm in his hand, as if it still carried the touch of the woman who had once held it. William examined the key carefully. It was ornate, with intricate engravings that seemed to tell a story. He had never seen anything like it in the palace before. The metal was tarnished with age, but the craftsmanship was exquisite. Small symbols were etched along its length, a rose, a crown, and something that looked like a heart with wings. As he turned the key over in his palm, William noticed something else in his mother's secret compartment. A small piece of paper yellowed with time bore an address in London. Below it, in his mother's distinctive handwriting, were the words, "For emergencies only. Some doors should never be opened, but if they must be, let love guide the way." The weight of the mysterious letter pressed against William's chest. Someone knew about Catherine's behavior, and they wanted him to discover something. But what? And why involve his mother's memory? The thought that Catherine might be hiding something significant enough to require such dramatic revelation filled him with dread. William spent the rest of the afternoon researching the address his mother had written down. It led to a small building in central London, registered under a name he didn't recognize. Public records showed it had been purchased 25 years ago, around the time of his parents' separation. The building had remained largely unused, with only occasional maintenance records. That evening, Catherine returned home later than usual. She seemed tired, her usually bright eyes clouded with something William couldn't identify. Over dinner, he watched her carefully, noting how she avoided direct eye contact and played with her food rather than eating. When he asked about her day, she gave the same vague responses that had become her pattern. "I visited some charities in the city," she said, her voice lacking its usual warmth. "Nothing particularly interesting, just the usual meetings and photo opportunities." William knew she was lying. He had checked with their security detail, and Catherine had dismissed them for the afternoon, claiming she needed privacy for a personal appointment. This had happened several times in recent weeks, always on days when she seemed most distant afterward. After Catherine went to bed early, claiming exhaustion, William sat alone in his study. The mysterious key lay before him on his desk, catching the light from the fireplace. He turned it over repeatedly, trying to understand its significance. The symbols etched into the metal seemed to pulse with meaning he couldn't quite grasp. Sleep came fitfully that night. William's dreams were filled with images of his mother, always just out of reach, trying to tell him something important. He woke several times to find Catherine's side of the bed empty, only to discover her standing by the window, staring out at the darkness. The next morning brought no relief from the growing tension. Catherine announced she would be out for most of the day, again declining security escort. She kissed William goodbye with the same distant affection that had replaced their once passionate connection. As she walked away, William noticed she carried a small bag he had never seen before. William made his decision as he watched Catherine's car disappear through the palace gates. Whatever secret she was keeping, whatever door this key was meant to open, he had to know the truth. The woman he loved was slipping away from him, and he refused to let her disappear without understanding why. He called his most trusted aide and arranged for a private car, one that wouldn't be tracked through official channels. The address in his mother's handwriting beckoned to him like a beacon in the darkness. As he prepared to leave, William tucked the ornate key safely into his jacket pocket, feeling its weight against his heart. The journey across London gave him time to think about all the changes in Catherine's behavior. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she sometimes seemed to be listening for something only she could hear. Whatever awaited him at that address, William knew it would change everything between them. As the car pulled up to the modest building, William felt his mother's presence strongly, as if she were guiding him toward a truth he needed to face. The building stood quietly among the bustling London streets, its brick facade weathered but well-maintained. William paid the driver and asked him to wait nearby. As he approached the entrance, he noticed the building had no obvious signage, just a simple number that matched the address from his mother's hidden note. The front door was painted dark blue, with brass fixtures that had been polished recently. William tried the main entrance, but it was locked. Walking around the building, he discovered a smaller side door tucked away from the street view. This door looked older, more worn, and when he examined it closely, he found a small keyhole that seemed to match the ornate key in his pocket. His heart pounded as he inserted the key. It turned smoothly, as if it had been used recently. The door opened into a narrow hallway lit by soft overhead lights. The walls were lined with photographs, and as William's eyes adjusted to the interior lighting, he realized he was looking at pictures of his mother throughout different periods of her life. Some photos showed Diana as a young woman, before her marriage, laughing with friends in casual settings. Others captured her during her royal duties, but these were different from the official portraits he knew. These images showed private moments. Diana reading to children in hospitals, sitting quietly with elderly patients, embracing people with a genuine warmth that transcended her public role. At the end of the hallway, William found a comfortable sitting room decorated with soft furnishings and warm colors. Fresh flowers sat in vases around the room, indicating someone had been here recently. On a central table lay a leather journal, its pages thick with handwriting. Next to it was a cup of tea, still warm to the touch. William opened the journal carefully. The first page bore his mother's signature and a date from just months before her death. As he read, his understanding of everything began to shift. The journal detailed Diana's work with a private organization that helped women and children in crisis situations. Not the official charity work that appeared in newspapers, but something much more personal and dangerous. The entries revealed that Diana had been secretly helping women escape abusive relationships, providing them with safe houses, new identities, and financial support to start fresh lives. She had funded this work privately, using her own money and influence to create a network of protection that operated outside official channels. One entry, dated just weeks before Diana's death, mentioned her concern about the future of this work. She wrote about training someone trustworthy to continue the mission, someone with both the resources and the heart to protect vulnerable people. The final entry mentioned meeting with a young woman who had shown exceptional dedication to helping others, someone Diana believed could carry on the secret work. William turned the pages with growing amazement and pride. His mother had created something beautiful and necessary, a hidden legacy of protection and hope. But as he continued reading, he began to understand why Catherine had been acting so strangely. The most recent entries in the journal were not in his mother's handwriting. The ink was fresh, and the writing belonged to Catherine. Page after page detailed her work continuing Diana's mission. She had been secretly running the organization for over a year, using her position and resources to help women and children escape dangerous situations. Catherine's entries revealed the enormous emotional toll this work was taking on her. She wrote about sleepless nights worrying about the families under her protection. She described having to make quick decisions that could mean life or death for vulnerable people. The weight of keeping such important work secret from William, combined with the constant fear of putting those she helped at risk, was slowly breaking her heart. One entry particularly struck William. Catherine had written about a young mother and her 2 children who had been hiding from an abusive father. The man had connections to organized crime and had threatened to kill the entire family if they ever tried to leave. Catherine had personally arranged for them to be moved to a safe location, but the process required her to be away from home for extended periods, making up excuses about charity work and personal appointments. William read about Catherine's internal struggle with keeping secrets from him. She wrote that she wanted desperately to share this work with her husband, but Diana's original notes had been clear. The fewer people who knew about the organization, the safer everyone would be. Catherine had been carrying this burden alone, protecting both the vulnerable families and William himself from the potential dangers involved. As he continued reading, William discovered that Catherine had been receiving threats. Someone had been following her, taking photographs and leaving intimidating messages. She had increased security for the safe houses and changed her own routines, which explained her erratic behavior and distant demeanor. The most recent entry was dated just 2 days ago. Catherine had written about a particularly difficult case involving a teenager who had been trafficked and was now in hiding. The girl reminded Catherine of herself at that age, and she had become personally invested in ensuring the young woman's safety and recovery. William closed the journal and sat in the quiet room, surrounded by his mother's memory and his wife's secret pain. Everything made sense now. Catherine's absences, her emotional distance, her exhaustion, and her reluctance to discuss her days. She had been carrying on Diana's most important work while protecting William from the knowledge that could put him and others in danger. A soft sound from the back of the building caught William's attention. He heard voices, one he recognized as Catherine's, speaking in low, urgent tones with someone else. Moving quietly through the building, he found a back room where Catherine sat with a young woman who looked to be in her early 20s. The girl's eyes were red from crying, and Catherine held her hands in a gesture of comfort and support. William watched from the doorway as Catherine spoke softly to the young woman, assuring her that she would be safe, that the people hunting her would never find her in the new location that had been arranged. Catherine's voice carried a strength and compassion that reminded William powerfully of his mother. "You're going to have a new life," Catherine said gently, "a chance to heal and grow and become whoever you want to be. That's what Princess Diana would have wanted for you, and it's what I want too." The young woman looked up at Catherine with such gratitude and hope that William felt his own eyes fill with tears. He was witnessing something extraordinary, his wife carrying on his mother's most sacred work, protecting the most vulnerable people in society, while sacrificing her own peace and happiness to do so. William stepped back from the doorway, not wanting to intrude on the private moment. He returned to the sitting room and waited, his mind racing with the implications of everything he had discovered. Catherine was not keeping secrets to hurt him. She was keeping them to protect him and countless others. 20 minutes later, Catherine appeared in the sitting room doorway, her face pale with shock at seeing William there. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Catherine's eyes moved from William's face to the open journal on the table, and he watched as understanding and fear crossed her features. "How long have you been here?" Catherine asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Long enough to understand everything," William replied, standing up slowly. "Long enough to realize what an incredible woman I married and what a fool I've been for not seeing the signs." Catherine sank into a chair across from him, her hands shaking slightly. "I never wanted you to find out this way. I never wanted you to find out at all, actually. It was supposed to stay hidden forever." William moved to sit beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Kate, why didn't you tell me?" "Did you think I wouldn't support this work? Did you think I wouldn't want to help?" Tears began to form in Catherine's eyes. "It wasn't about not trusting you, William. It was about protecting you. Your mother's notes were very clear about the dangers. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone would be. And some of the people we help, they're running from very dangerous individuals. Organized crime, human traffickers, people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt a member of the royal family if they thought it would help them find their victims. Catherine explained how she had discovered the organization 18 months ago. She had been going through some of Diana's personal effects that had been stored away for years, items that William had never felt ready to examine. Among them was a letter addressed to the next guardian with instructions on how to contact the organization if Diana was no longer able to continue the work. I thought it was just another one of her charity projects at first, Catherine said, wiping away tears. But when I made contact, I learned about the scope of what she had created. Safe houses across the country, a network of trusted people, financial resources set aside specifically for emergencies. Your mother had built something incredible, and it was about to disappear because no one else knew about it. Catherine had initially planned to tell William everything, but the first case she handled changed her mind. A woman and her 3 children had been hiding from an abusive husband who had police connections. The man had been using official resources to track his family, and only the complete secrecy of Diana's organization had kept them safe. I realized that this work required absolute discretion, Catherine continued. One wrong word, one security breach, and people could die. Your mother understood that. She kept it separate from her public life, from the palace, from everyone who might accidentally compromise the safety of those she was helping. William listened as Catherine described the past year and a half of her life. She had been managing dozens of cases, coordinating with social workers, therapists, and safe house operators across the country. She had personally funded emergency relocations, medical treatment, and educational opportunities for survivors of abuse and trafficking. The young woman you saw today, Catherine said, she's only 19, but she's been through more trauma than most people experience in a lifetime. She was sold by her own family when she was 14. It took her 5 years to escape, and now she's finally free. But the people who held her are still looking for her. They see her as their property. William felt a deep anger rising in his chest, not at Catherine, but at the circumstances that had forced her to carry this burden alone. What can I do to help? He asked simply. Catherine looked surprised. William, you can't get involved. It's too dangerous. If anyone discovered that the future king was connected to this work, it would put everyone at risk. The organization depends on staying invisible. But you're the future queen, William pointed out. If it's too dangerous for me, isn't it too dangerous for you too? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Maybe, she admitted. But I can't stop now. There are too many people depending on this work. And honestly, it's the most meaningful thing I've ever done. When I see a child who's been rescued from trafficking finally smile again, or when a woman who's been beaten for years learns to trust someone again, it makes everything worth it. William understood then why Catherine had seemed so distant. She had been living 2 completely different lives, her public role as a royal with all its privileges and ceremonies, and her secret work helping the most vulnerable people in society. The emotional weight of constantly switching between these worlds would be enormous. The threats you've been receiving, William said, remembering what he had read in the journal. How serious are they? Catherine's expression darkened. Serious enough? Someone has been watching me, taking photographs when I visit safe houses. They've been leaving messages. Nothing directly threatening, but clear warnings that they know what I'm doing. I've had to change my routines, vary my routes, and increase security at all our locations. William felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that someone was threatening Catherine while she was trying to help vulnerable people made him both angry and afraid. Have you reported this to our security team? I can't, Catherine said firmly. Any official investigation would expose the entire organization. We've had to handle it privately, which means we're somewhat limited in our response options. Catherine explained that she had been working with a small team of trusted individuals who had helped Diana with the original organization. They included a former police detective, a social worker with decades of experience, and a financial advisor who managed the funding. All of them understood the need for complete secrecy. We think someone is trying to use the information about my involvement to blackmail either the royal family or some of the powerful people whose victims we've helped, Catherine said. They haven't made any direct demands yet, but the surveillance has been getting more intensive. William realized that Catherine had been facing not just the emotional toll of helping trauma survivors, but also the constant fear that her work might be discovered and used against the people she was trying to protect. The weight of carrying these secrets alone must have been crushing. "There's something else," Catherine said hesitantly. "The organization is running out of money. Your mother left substantial funds, but we've been helping more people than ever before. And the costs keep rising. Safe houses, medical care, legal assistance, relocation expenses. It all adds up quickly." Catherine had been using her own personal funds to keep the organization running, but those resources were nearly exhausted too. She had been considering whether to scale back the work or find a way to bring in additional funding without compromising the secrecy that kept everyone safe. William sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of what Catherine had been managing alone. She had been continuing his mother's most important legacy while protecting him from the dangers involved, all while dealing with financial constraints and security threats. "I'm so sorry," William said finally. "I'm sorry you've had to carry this alone. I'm sorry I didn't recognize the signs of what you were going through. And I'm sorry that my position makes it harder for you to do this work safely." Catherine reached over and took his hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. I chose to take this on. I chose to keep it secret from you. But I need you to understand, this work has to continue. These people have nowhere else to turn." In the days following his discovery, William found himself seeing Catherine with completely new eyes. Every time she smiled at a public event, he wondered if she was thinking about one of the families she was protecting. When she seemed tired during official engagements, he knew it might be because she had spent the night helping someone in crisis. The weight of keeping Catherine's secret was harder than William had expected. During their daily briefings with palace staff, he had to pretend everything was normal while knowing that his wife was risking her safety to continue his mother's hidden legacy. When security personnel asked about Catherine's unusual schedule patterns, William found himself making excuses and covering for her absences. 3 days after his visit to the building, William received another anonymous letter. This one was different, more direct and threatening. The message was simple. "We know about the Duchess's activities. If you want to protect both your family and the people she's helping, meet us tomorrow at midnight. Come alone to the address provided." William stared at the letter, his hands trembling with anger and fear. Someone was using Catherine's compassionate work as leverage against them. The address provided was in a rough part of London, the kind of place where terrible things could happen to people who went there alone at night. When Catherine returned home that evening, William showed her the letter. Her face went white as she read it, and she sank into a chair as if her legs could no longer support her. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen," she whispered. "They're going to use this against us, against the families we're trying to protect." William knelt beside Catherine's chair and took her hands. "We'll figure this out together. You don't have to face this alone anymore." Catherine shook her head. "You can't go to that meeting, William. It's obviously a trap. They want to get you involved so they can have leverage over the entire royal family. Then what do you suggest we do?" William asked. "Ignore the threat and hope it goes away?" Catherine was quiet for a long time, staring at the threatening letter. "I think," she said finally, "it might be time to shut down the organization. If continuing this work puts you and our children at risk, then it's not worth it." The pain in Catherine's voice as she spoke these words was evident. William could see that the thought of abandoning the people who depended on her help was breaking her heart, but she was prepared to make that sacrifice to protect her family. "No," William said firmly. "Absolutely not. You are not giving up this work because of some coward who thinks they can intimidate us." William spent that night researching the address from the threatening letter. The building was registered to a shell company, with ownership buried under layers of corporate structures. However, his investigation revealed something interesting. The building was located just 2 blocks from a warehouse that had recently been raided by police for human trafficking activities. The next morning, William made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going to the midnight meeting or allowing Catherine to shut down the organization, he contacted his most trusted security advisor and arranged a private meeting. He was going to break Diana's rule about keeping the work secret, but only to the minimal extent necessary to protect Catherine and the families she was helping. Sir David Thompson had been protecting the royal family for over 20 years. William trusted him completely. and he knew that David would find a way to handle the situation without compromising the organization's mission. When William explained everything, David listened without judgment, taking notes and asking practical questions about security protocols and communication methods. "Your Highness," David said when William finished explaining, "with respect, this is one of the most dangerous situations I've ever encountered. The Duchess has been operating in a world where people kill for much less than what she's been doing." David explained that the threats were likely coming from multiple sources. Some might be from criminals whose victims Catherine had helped escape. Others could be from people who wanted to profit from the information by selling it to tabloids or foreign governments. The most dangerous possibility was that organized crime groups were planning to eliminate the threat Catherine posed to their operations. "We need to take immediate action to secure all the safe house locations and the people currently under protection," David said. "We also need to identify who's behind these threats and neutralize them before they can act." William authorized David to use whatever resources were necessary. Within hours, discreet security teams were positioned around all the organization's locations. Background checks were run on everyone who had access to information about Catherine's involvement. Electronic surveillance was implemented to monitor any communications related to the threats. Meanwhile, Catherine was struggling with the decision to involve palace security in her secret work. That evening she sat in her private study, looking through photos of the people she had helped over the past year and a half. There was Maria, a woman from Eastern Europe who had been trafficked for domestic labor and had finally escaped after years of captivity. There was James, a teenager who had aged out of the foster care system and fallen victim to predators who promised him housing and work. "I keep thinking about your mother," Catherine told William as they prepared for bed. "She managed to do this work for years without involving palace security. She kept everyone safe through careful planning and discretion." William sat beside Catherine on their bed and took her hand. "My mother was extraordinary, but she wasn't infallible. Maybe if she had trusted more people with her secret, maybe if she had better protection, things might have been different." The reference to his mother's death hung in the air between them. William had never directly blamed the paparazzi and the dangerous circumstances surrounding Diana's final years for the car crash that killed her. But the connection was always there in his mind. "I can't bear the thought that my work might put our children in danger," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "What if someone tries to hurt George or Charlotte to get to us?" William pulled Catherine close, feeling her body shake with sobs she had been holding back for months. "Our security team is already protecting our children from dozens of potential threats every day. This is just one more situation they need to monitor. But the good you're doing, the lives you're saving, that has to count for something too." The next day brought an unexpected development. David's investigation had identified the source of some of the threats. A private investigator hired by a wealthy businessman whose ex-wife Catherine had helped relocate was behind the surveillance and intimidation attempts. The businessman had been using his resources to track down his former wife and children, whom he had been abusing for years. He hired someone to find out how his ex-wife disappeared so completely, David explained during a briefing. The investigator discovered the connection to the Duchess and has been gathering evidence to either blackmail the royal family or sell the information to the highest bidder. David had evidence that the businessman was connected to several criminal organizations that specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. The man had a history of violence and had made explicit threats about what he would do to his ex-wife and children when he found them. "We have enough evidence to have him arrested," David continued, "but that would likely expose the organization's existence during the legal proceedings." William and Catherine faced an impossible choice. They could have the businessman arrested and risk exposing all the families currently under protection, or they could find another way to neutralize the threat while maintaining secrecy. Catherine made the decision without hesitation. "Arrest him," she said firmly. "I won't let him hurt his family or anyone else. If the organization gets exposed, we'll deal with those consequences. But we can't let a violent criminal continue threatening people just to protect our secret." That evening, as police arrested the businessman and his associates, Catherine stood at the window of the secret building, watching the street below. William stood beside her, both of them knowing that their lives were about to change dramatically. The arrests made headlines across the country within hours, While the media reports focused on the businessman's criminal activities and connections to human trafficking operations, they also mentioned that his investigation had been targeting a high-profile charitable organization that helped abuse victims. The stories didn't name Catherine directly, but William knew it was only a matter of time before reporters started connecting the pieces. Catherine spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled panic, coordinating with the organization's network to ensure all the families under protection were moved to backup locations. The phones at every safe house rang constantly as social workers and protection officers worked to relocate their charges before any media attention could compromise their safety. 37 families, Catherine told William as she sat surrounded by files and emergency contact lists. 37 families that need to be moved to completely new locations because of this exposure. The logistical challenges were enormous. Children had to be withdrawn from schools, adults had to leave jobs they had just started, and entire support networks had to be rebuilt from scratch. The financial cost was staggering, but more importantly, the emotional toll on already traumatized people was heartbreaking. William watched Catherine work 18-hour days, coordinating relocations while trying to provide emotional support to families who were terrified of being discovered by their abusers. He saw her take phone calls from crying children who didn't understand why they had to leave another new home, and from adults who had finally started to feel safe, only to learn they had to run again. On the 4th day after the arrests, Catherine received a call that changed everything. Sarah Mitchell, a journalist from The Guardian who specialized in social issues, had been investigating the businessman's activities and had discovered connections to the organization. Instead of writing an exposé, she wanted to meet with Catherine to discuss how to protect the families involved while still reporting on the larger criminal network. "She says she knows about your involvement," Catherine told William after taking the call, "but she also says she's spent years writing about domestic abuse and human trafficking. She understands what's at stake." The meeting with Sarah Mitchell took place at the secret building, with David Thompson present to ensure security protocols were maintained. Sarah was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a careful way of speaking that suggested she understood the sensitivity of the situation. "Your Highness," Sarah said to Catherine, "I want you to know that I have no intention of exposing this organization or putting vulnerable people at risk. But I've been investigating the criminal network you've been fighting against, and I think there might be a way to use media attention to actually strengthen your work instead of destroying it." Sarah explained her proposal. Instead of hiding from media attention, they could control it by going public with carefully selected information. They could announce the existence of a royal-sponsored organization dedicated to helping abuse victims without revealing specific details about safe house, locations, or current cases. The public would be overwhelmingly supportive, Sarah argued. Princess Diana was beloved for her charitable work. If people knew that the Duchess of Cambridge was continuing that legacy by helping the most vulnerable people in society, it would generate enormous public support and probably significant financial donations. Catherine was skeptical. But what about the families who need complete anonymity? What about the criminals who are still looking for their victims? Sarah had thought about this too. You could create a 2-tiered system, keep the existing underground network for the most dangerous cases, but also develop a more public-facing organization that could help people who don't need complete secrecy. The media attention would actually provide cover for the hidden work. Everyone would assume the public charity was all there was. William found himself intrigued by the idea. It would certainly solve our funding problems, he pointed out, and it might deter some criminals if they knew that high-profile people were actively working against them. Over the following week, Catherine wrestled with the decision. She consulted with Diana's original team members, all of whom had different opinions about whether going public was the right choice. The former police detective argued that publicity would make their work more difficult. The social worker thought it might help them reach more people who needed assistance. The financial advisor was enthusiastic about the potential for increased funding. The decision was ultimately made for them when Catherine received a call from Elena, a young woman who had been one of their first successful cases. Elena had been trafficked from Romania when she was 16 and had spent 3 years in captivity before escaping with the organization's help. She was now 24, had completed her education and was working as a translator while studying law. I heard about what happened on the news, Elena told Catherine. I know you're worried about people like me being found if the organization becomes public, but I want you to know that I'm ready to tell my story, if it would help other people get the help they need. Elena's call was followed by similar messages from other survivors the organization had helped. One after another, people who had been given new lives through Diana's network reached out to offer their support for whatever direction Catherine chose to take the work. They're not asking us to stay hidden to protect them, Catherine realized during a conversation with William that night. They're offering to step forward to help protect other people. The next morning, Catherine made her decision. She would work with Sarah Mitchell to create a controlled media announcement about the organization's existence. They would reveal enough information to generate public support and funding while maintaining the security of ongoing operations. The announcement was scheduled for the following week. Catherine would give an exclusive interview to Sarah Mitchell, discussing her continuation of Princess Diana's charitable legacy without revealing specific operational details. The palace would simultaneously announce the creation of the Diana Legacy Foundation, which would publicly raise funds and awareness for anti-trafficking and domestic abuse prevention efforts. As news of the upcoming announcement spread through the organization's network, something unexpected happened. Donations began arriving even before the official launch. People who had heard rumors about Catherine's involvement sent checks to addresses they had found through various sources. Local businesses offered services and resources. Other charitable organizations reached out to propose partnerships and collaboration. It's like your mother is still inspiring people, Catherine told William as they reviewed the early response. Even the hint that we're continuing her work has brought out the best in people. The night before the interview, Catherine couldn't sleep. She walked through the secret building one more time, looking at the photographs of Diana and thinking about how different their lives might have been if Diana had lived to see her work continue. In her mother-in-law's private study, Catherine found a letter she had never seen before, hidden in a drawer that had always been locked. The letter was addressed to my future daughter, and it was dated just weeks before Diana's death. As Catherine read, tears began streaming down her face. Diana had written about her hopes that someday, a woman would join the royal family who truly understood the importance of helping those who couldn't help themselves. She had written about her dream that her charitable work would continue through someone who shared her compassion and courage. I may not live to see the woman who captures William's heart, Diana had written, but I know she will be extraordinary. I know she will understand that with great privilege comes the responsibility to protect those who have been forgotten by society. I hope she will find this letter someday, and know that she has my blessing to continue this work in whatever way feels right to her. Catherine sat in Diana's chair, holding the letter and feeling a profound connection to the woman who had started it all. Diana had somehow known that her work would find its way to the right person, even if she couldn't be there to guide the transition herself. William found Catherine there an hour later, still crying over the letter. He read it himself and felt his own eyes fill with tears as he recognized his mother's voice in the words, her endless optimism and faith in the goodness of others. She knew, Catherine whispered. Somehow she knew that this work would continue, that someone would care enough to take the risks necessary to help these people. William held Catherine close, both of them surrounded by his mother's memory and the weight of the responsibility they had inherited. Tomorrow changes everything, he said softly. Are you ready? Catherine wiped her tears and looked around the room that had been her secret sanctuary for so many months. I'm ready, she said with conviction. These families deserve better than hiding in shadows. Diana's work deserves recognition, and maybe if we do this right, we can help even more people than we ever imagined possible. The morning of the interview dawned bright and clear. Catherine dressed carefully, choosing clothes that Diana had often worn, simple, elegant, and approachable. She wanted to honor her mother-in-law's memory, while also representing the families who had trusted her with their safety. As Catherine prepared to leave for the interview that would change their lives forever, William took her hand and squeezed it gently. My mother would be so proud of you, he said. She would be proud of the woman you've become and the work you've chosen to continue. Catherine smiled through her tears, feeling Diana's presence strongly as she prepared to step into the light and share their secret with the world. The door she was about to open would lead not to an ending, but to a new beginning for Diana's legacy and for all the people who needed their help. The interview took place in the same sitting room where William had first discovered Catherine's secret. Sarah Mitchell had agreed to conduct the conversation in the building that held so much meaning for both Diana's legacy and Catherine's journey. The room had been prepared carefully, with fresh flowers and soft lighting that would make Catherine appear warm and approachable on camera. As the cameras began rolling, Catherine spoke with a quiet strength that reminded William powerfully of his mother. She talked about discovering Diana's hidden charitable work and feeling called to continue the mission of protecting vulnerable people. Her voice remained steady as she described the families she had helped, though she never revealed specific details that might compromise anyone's safety. Princess Diana believed that those with privilege had a responsibility to protect those without power, Catherine said, looking directly into the camera. She created something beautiful and necessary, a network of protection for people who had nowhere else to turn. When I discovered her work, I knew I had to find a way to continue it. Sarah Mitchell asked thoughtful questions that allowed Catherine to explain the importance of the work without revealing operational details. Catherine spoke about the courage of abuse survivors who had trusted her with their stories, and about the dedication of the social workers, counselors, and volunteers who made the organization possible. Every person we've been able to help represents someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's child, Catherine explained. These aren't statistics or case numbers. They're human beings who deserve safety, dignity, and the chance to rebuild their lives. When Sarah asked about the personal cost of keeping such important work secret, Catherine's composure finally broke. Tears filled her eyes as she talked about the isolation of carrying such a heavy responsibility alone, and about her fear that her involvement might put vulnerable people at greater risk. There were nights when I would lie awake wondering if I was doing the right thing, Catherine admitted. The weight of knowing that people's lives depended on decisions I was making. It was overwhelming sometimes. But then I would think about Princess Diana and how she had managed to help so many people despite similar challenges, and I would find the strength to continue. William watched from behind the cameras, his heart breaking and swelling with pride simultaneously. Catherine was sharing her deepest fears and greatest triumphs with millions of people, transforming her secret burden into a public call for compassion and action. The most powerful moment of the interview came when Catherine was asked about her hopes for the future of the organization. Her voice became stronger, more determined as she talked about her vision for expanding their reach while maintaining the security that kept vulnerable people safe. We want to create a world where no one has to choose between staying in an abusive situation and living in fear, Catherine said, where children don't grow up believing that violence is normal, and where survivors of trafficking can rebuild their lives with dignity and support. When the interview concluded, Sarah Mitchell thanked Catherine for her courage in speaking publicly about such sensitive work. This story will change lives, Sarah said simply. People needed to know that this kind of compassion and protection exists. The interview aired 3 days later, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. The palace switchboard was flooded with calls from people wanting to donate money, volunteer time, or share their own stories of survival. Major corporations offered partnerships and funding. Other charitable organizations reached out to collaborate on anti-trafficking and domestic abuse prevention efforts. Most importantly, survivors of abuse and trafficking began reaching out directly, asking for help. The public announcement had given people hope that there were safe resources available, and the demand for services grew exponentially almost overnight. We've received over 3,000 calls in the first week, Catherine reported to William as they reviewed the response together. 3,000 people who felt safe enough to reach out because they knew we existed. The financial response was equally remarkable. The Diana Legacy Foundation raised more money in its first month than the secret organization had used in 2 years of operations. Major donors stepped forward with substantial commitments, and smaller donations poured in from ordinary people who wanted to support the work. But the most meaningful responses came from the families Catherine had already helped. Elena, the young woman who had offered to share her story, appeared on television to talk about how the organization had saved her life. Other survivors followed, creating a powerful chorus of voices that validated the importance of the work and encouraged more people to seek help. "You gave me back my life," One survivor wrote in a letter to Catherine. Now I want to help give other people back theirs. 6 months after the interview aired, William and Catherine stood together in the main office of the newly expanded Diana Legacy Foundation. The organization now operated openly, with professional staff, proper security protocols, and partnerships with law enforcement agencies. The secret network still existed for the most dangerous cases, but it now operated under the protection and resources of the larger, public foundation. Catherine had hired Maria, one of the first women she had helped, as the foundation's victim services coordinator. Elena was completing her law degree while working part-time as a translator and advocate. James, the teenager who had aged out of foster care, was now in college and volunteering with at-risk youth programs. "Look at what you've built," William said to Catherine as they toured the new facilities. "Look at how many lives you've changed." Catherine smiled, but William could see that her eyes were tired. The public success of the foundation had brought new challenges and responsibilities. She was now managing a staff of 50 people, overseeing multiple programs and dealing with media attention she had never wanted. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of the secret work," Catherine admitted, "when it was just about helping one family at a time, without worrying about publicity or board meetings or funding reports." William understood her feeling. The expansion of Diana's work had been necessary and successful, but it had also changed the intimate, personal nature of what Catherine had been doing. The woman who had quietly helped families escape danger was now a public figure, managing a major charitable organization. That evening, Catherine received a call that reminded her why all the complications were worthwhile. A teenage girl in Manchester had seen the television interview and found the courage to call the foundation's hotline. She had been trafficked from Vietnam 2 years earlier and had finally escaped from her captors. The foundation's rapid response team was able to get her to safety within hours of her call. "She said she called because she remembered your face from the interview," the social worker reported to Catherine. "She said you looked like someone who would keep her safe." William found Catherine crying in their private study later that night, but these were tears of relief and gratitude rather than sorrow. The door she had opened by going public had led to this moment. Another life saved, another family protected, another person given the chance to heal and grow. "Diana would be so proud," William said, sitting beside Catherine and taking her hand. "Not just of the work you've continued, but of the courage you showed in making it bigger than she ever imagined possible." Catherine leaned against William's shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility she carried, but also the satisfaction of knowing that Diana's legacy was stronger than ever. The secret work would continue, but now it was supported by an entire community of people dedicated to protecting the vulnerable and fighting against those who would harm them. In the months that followed, the Diana Legacy Foundation became a model for other organizations around the world. Catherine spoke at international conferences, advised government officials on anti-trafficking policies, and continued to personally oversee the most sensitive cases. The secret building where William had first discovered her work became a training center for social workers and law enforcement officers. As William watched Catherine transform from a woman carrying secret burdens to a confident leader inspiring global change, he finally understood what his mother had meant when she wrote about privilege creating responsibility. Catherine had unlocked more than just a door. She had opened a pathway for countless people to find safety, healing, and hope. The tears that had marked the beginning of their journey had been replaced by the quiet satisfaction of work that honored Diana's memory while creating a better future for those who needed protection most. As William watched Catherine transform from a woman carrying secret burdens to a confident leader inspiring global change, he finally understood what his mother had meant when she wrote about privilege creating responsibility. Catherine had unlocked more than just a door. She had opened a pathway for countless people to find safety, healing, and hope. The tears that had marked the beginning of their journey had been replaced by the quiet satisfaction of work that honored Diana's memory while creating a better future for those who needed protection most.